Welcome back to a new episode of Masterminds and Wisdom.
I like that name.
Today, we're diving deep into this whole world of China's rise.
Right.
Everyone talks about China
Yeah.
and their economic miracle,
Right.
especially given like what happened with COVID and
Right.
trade tensions, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going beyond the headlines, right? We're trying to get a little bit deeper.
Cheaper.
And to do that, we're using Oo's book.
Breaking the cocoon.
Breaking the Cocoon. You ready?
I am, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating.
Okay.
Everyone talks about China and this economic miracle,
Ray.
right? But very few people actually understand, like, the depth of it.
Uh-huh.
It's way more than just cheap labor.
Right.
You know?
I think a lot of people.
Uni gives this great example of specialized manufacturing towns in China
Okay.
that are churning out these insane volumes of goods for the entire world.
I was reading about that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like one town
Like, they make it all.
makes a third of all the guitars in the world.
Right.
Or violins. Or wigs. Or steel tape measures. Like, it's mind-blowing.
It is
No idea.
It is mind-blowing. I mean, that's not just cheap labor.
Right.
That's serious expertise.
Yeah, it's like an ecosystem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These towns are like specialized gears in
Yeah.
this giant machine that China's built.
Yeah.
And it's all about these intricate supplier networks, the logistics that have been honed over decades.
Right.
Like this deep understanding
Yeah.
of global demand.
It's crazy.
It's incredible.
It's like they anticipated all this.
Right.
They knew.
And you know what? This is all tied to how Western economies have shifted, right?
Uh-huh.
Where they focus more on innovation and
Yeah.
outsourcing production.
So it's like it's like two sides
Exactly.
of the same coin almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like how did this connection even happen?
That's a great question.
Did someone like plan this?
Right?
You know, did they sit down and say, China, you're going to be the world's factory?
So it's actually more organic than you might think. And Irenaeus points to this thing that seems totally unrelated, right?
Okay.
Called the Bayh-Dole Act
Okay.
in the U.S.
Yeah.
back in 1980.
Okay.
It seems very technical, but it really supercharged innovation
Okay.
by letting smaller companies
Okay.
use university research
Yeah.
and patents.
Okay.
So suddenly you had tons of new technologies, but these smaller companies, they couldn't make them on this huge scale.
So enter China, right?
Exactly.
With a workforce.
It was a perfect match of supply and demand, America innovating, China producing the buying.
I see, yeah.
And this ties right back to those specialized towns.
Okay.
They weren't centrally planned.
Oh.
It was, China's land-based financing system.
Oh, okay.
Which is controversial, but it kind of unintentionally provided the space for them to spring up.
Wait, what is land-based financing?
Yeah. Good point.
I'm not sure I get that.
It's kind of a niche thing.
Okay.
Basically, local governments in China, they use land sales to fund development.
Okay.
It's complex.
Yep.
But it essentially gave these small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, access to capital, which allowed them to set up shop and plug into that global demand for manufacturing.
It's almost like this accidental...
It's like this perfect storm that created the China manufacturing we know today.
Wow. It's amazing how these seemingly unrelated things, like this law, and then,
Crazy how it all...
China having the system.
Index. Yeah, describes it like building with Lego blocks.
I like that.
Right. Each of these SMEs is like this specialized block. It makes just this one tiny part.
Okay.
But together, they form this incredibly efficient and flexible system.
I see. But this whole setup with, China being the manufacturing hub.
Right.
I mean, doesn't that
it does
create some global imbalances?
That's where concept of the global double circulation comes in. So imagine two cycles, right? One with Western economies. They're focused on innovation and services.
Right.
The other with non-Western economies, they provide raw materials.
Okay.
China sits in the middle.
I see.
Connecting both through manufacturing.
Right.
But the real power in terms of innovation and controlling global money flows still largely sits in the West.
So they're essential, but there's this...
It's this tension.
Because they're not really in control.
You're not calling all the shots.
Right.
Right. And it's reflected in those trade tensions that you mentioned.
Right.
And the pressure on China to reform.
Right. Think about all those canceled trade shows.
Right.
Due to the pandemic.
Right.
Or even like, do you remember the whole debate over those Chinese-made masks in the beginning?
Like everyone was suddenly talking about where their stuff came from.
Again.
Made in China. You know, what does that mean?
And these events, they seem small.
Yeah.
But they actually reveal how deeply reliant the world is on China.
I see.
And they highlight this growing distrust that could have massive ripple effects.
This made in China thing is a lot more complicated.
There's more to it than meets the eye. And what's concerning is that this distrust could lead to like a decoupling. Where China and Western tech kind of split.
Right.
And you create these parallel systems.
I see.
And that might actually slow down China's growth long term.
So the seemingly simple thing of buying a made in China product is actually like...
It's all tangled up.
Wrapped up in all this global economics and politics.
It makes you think twice.
It really does.
Yeah. And Yuzia suggests that China could learn from a surprising source. Post-WWII Germany, they had to rebuild trust after the war. And they did it by depoliticizing their manufacturing.
What does that mean?
Basically showing the world that they were reliable partners.
I see.
Not a threat.
Right.
That's
a really interesting comparison. But how can China depoliticize when so much of their economy is tied to the government?
That's a tough question. And it connects to this broader point that Uz makes about offensive encapsulation thinking. It's a fancy way of saying viewing everything through this like nationalistic lens, which ultimately breeds distrust and hurts everyone.
So they're kind of stuck in this cycle where their past success, fueled by this nationalistic drive, might actually be what holds them back in the future.
Exactly. It's this challenge they have to overcome to move forward. China needs to recognize that global trade, it's a dance. Not a wrestling match. Cooperation, not confrontation.
I see.
Is key for everyone to prosper.
It's not about sacrificing your own interests, but realizing that those interests are actually
they're best served
by a
collaborative, stable, cooperative world. That makes sense.
It's this balancing act.
But it's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Especially with all the geopolitical stuff. Swirling around.
But let's zoom in on something specific. You know, China's dominance in manufacturing. It's not just a recent phenomenon. Dives into this whole history of these specialized manufacturing towns, showing how they became essential to the global supply chain.
Like the guitar towns, the wig towns we were talking about before.
Exactly. And they illustrate how China's manufacturing evolved, going from basic goods to these incredibly specialized products.
But it's more than just cheap labor, though, right? It's this intricate...
It's this network of businesses.
It's where that Lego block analogy really shines. Each SME is like a block. It contributes this very specific function to create this flexible and efficient whole.
And this system kind of emerged organically, right?
So it wasn't like...
It wasn't some grand scheme.
The master plan by the Chinese government.
It was driven by market forces.
That's surprising.
More than top-down planning.
Wow.
It shows the power of the market. Even within a system that's often seen as state-controlled.
That's where I think Inya's point about understanding both the China logic and the global logic is so important. He's not saying China is playing by completely different rules. But that their scale and their history,
their unique scale,
create certain dynamics
that we need to understand.
We need to wrap our heads around. You know?
And China's size and their history have really shaped
their
economic path.
Their economic path.
Leading to approaches that might not fit neatly into our Western models.
Into our model.
But that doesn't mean that they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're wrong or bad.
Or bad, It just means we need a broader understanding. Of how these systems work.
Of how economic systems work and evolve.
It's a reminder that the world is complex.
Absolutely.
And these simplistic explanations. They're dangerous.
Dangerous.
And that's a major takeaway from our deep dive today. understanding the nuances of China's rise, its global interconnectedness, and the forces that are shaping its future.
Yeah.
That's crucial for navigating the 21st century.
Yeah. We've covered a lot from these tiny towns making these really specific goods to this whole global double circulation concept. And even this comparison to post-war Germany.
It's fascinating.
It is. What stands out to you as like the most important insight?
I think for me, it's realizing that China's success
isn't just about cheap labor or government control. It's a story of adaptation, innovation, and deep global integration. It challenges our assumptions, and it makes us think more deeply about how economics and politics shape our world.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah,
it really is a fascinating story.
It is.
It makes you think, like, what comes next?
Right.
So with all this in mind, China's rise, their global ties, the potential for partnership, but also conflict. What's the biggest question?
That's the big question
they face going forward in the next few years?
I think building on what Aaron has laid out, it boils down to this. Can China move beyond being the world's factory and become like a true leader in innovation and tech? They've mastered what he calls the one-to-N type of innovation. Taking existing things and scaling them up incredibly efficiently.
Really well.
But can they make that jump to 0 to 1?
What's that?
The kind of groundbreaking stuff that disrupts entire industries and shapes the future.
So it's like they've been playing catch-up. But now they need to set the pace.
Exactly.
It's a huge challenge.
It is a massive challenge. It means fostering a more open research environment. Attracting global talent. Navigating this tricky geopolitics.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's not going to be easy.
No.
But the stakes are very high. If they nail it, China becomes a true global leader, shaping not just what we buy, but the very future of technology.
Wow. And if they don't? What happens if they
just
stay focused on just making stuff?
If they miss that 0 to 1 boat.
I
mean, history shows us that countries that cling to the old ways, while tech leaps forward, they tend to stagnate.
I see.
They become stuck making things based on somebody else's ideas.
Right.
And for China, that could mean slower growth, fading global influence, struggling to keep up with things like AI, biotech,
all this
renewable energy, all that stuff.
That's going to be important.
That's going to define the next few decades.
It's like being the best horse-drawn carriage maker as cars take over.
Perfect analogy. So China's
at this crossroads.
They are.
Stick with what worked before. Or take a risk.
Take a leap.
For something bigger.
For a whole new level. And this choice...
This is the big one.
...impacts the whole world. A China embracing innovation and global cooperation could be a force for good, helping to solve climate change, poverty, disease.
You know, all the big problems.
But a China turning inwards, focused only on making stuff, could mean a more divided, unstable world.
You know, ripe for conflict and economic turmoil.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to ponder. So as we wrap up our deep dive into China's rise, we're left with this sense of...
This feeling.
Incredible opportunity, but also serious challenges ahead.
Absolutely.
It's a story that's still being written.
It is.
And the choices made in the coming years will impact us all.
They will.
And we encourage you, our listeners, to keep digging into this.
To keep exploring.
Exploring China's global role. And thinking about what it means.
What it means for you.
For your lives.
Your life.
And the future we're all building together.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.